Hey everybody, these are the official instructions and pro tips for building the Ultimate SXC24 wheels, the Builder's Kit. This is a Builder's Kit, so it will not come with all the parts that you need. You will have to either source or make some 3D printed parts yourself. All of the plastic parts do not come with the kit, but the download and printable files will come with a purchase of any of the kits. What I like to use is an industrial printing machine by HP called MJF, and I get it from a place called Jaws Tech. And you can order there as well. Simply upload the files. It'll cost you between $70 and $80 to print a full set of 4 wheels yourself. But here's what you get for that. Take a look at this part. It is so smooth, you can't see any layers. It almost looks like an injection molded quality part. It's really, really nice. Now, when the part is printed raw, it comes out like this gray, rough finish. And if you're not looking at your parts, if these go inside or something, it's great to use this finish. But what I like to do is called vapor smoothing or vapor polishing. And that's how you get this super smooth surface. They recently introduced a new material called PA12S, which makes a smoother finish than normal PA12. That's a nylon-based material, and whatever they've done makes this really, really smooth. I'm not sure if you can tell the difference in the camera or not, but this one on the left is normal PA12, which has just a little bit of a rough texture to it, where the PA12S for smooth is a little bit smoother. You can't really see any blemishes or print lines that you can in this one. So I've been getting all my stuff done in the PA12S. Once again, MJF, multi-jet fusion technology. It's different than FDM home printers like Bamboo, but it comes out really nice, especially after you get it smoothed. Now you can also get what's called polished. And I'm not 100% sure how they do this, but this provides a real matte finish. I think you can see that there. So you've either got a gloss or a matte finish. So the as printed unfinished version looks like this. It's perfectly strong, works great. A little bit more money will get you the polished version, and for even more money you can get the vapor smooth version. So for a small upcharge you can get these better finishes. I think this polished finish is maybe a quarter more, and this glossy finish was maybe 50 cents more. So not that much more expensive, and you get the finish you want. You can also get these dyed in different colors, but this material is black underneath, so any materials that get dyed come out kind of dark, especially if you vapor smooth them. So when you look on the website and they offer red, blue, green, know that those are going to be very, very dark red, blue, green tints of this dark finish. So I never really do colors because they don't come out great with this technology, but you do have these great surface finish options. So the most important part that comes with your kit is these carbon fiber base plates. And I'm sure if you've ordered this, you've already seen how these go together. You've got the outer face and you've got the inner face. And these are going to be glued together just like this. And that really is 90% of your wheel right there, with the exception of the weight hangers if you want to do that option. But there are some prep steps first. What you want to do is just sand off the outside edges. They're going to be a little bit rough from the chop saw. So on both sides, just sand off the edges. I mean, this really isn't absolutely critical. It just reduces splinters and reduces splintering in the future. More importantly, what you want to do is sand the inside. So knock off the rough edges because you're going to glue to that. You don't want to breathe this dust, so always wear a mask. And very important, you want to rough up this inside surface. So I'm not just putting a chamfer on, I'm actually going to rough it up, and that's so the glue sticks better. So just give it a little bit of rough like this, and that's really all you need. Now, one thing to know about carbon fiber dust is you don't want to breathe it. And when you're sanding it like this, it does become airborne and you could potentially breathe it in. But it's not toxic to the touch. I'm just going to wash my hands with soap and water and wash the part off with soap and water, and you're good to go. No further precautions are necessary. Now, before you sand these, there is a small chance of getting carbon fiber splinters, so be careful when you're running your finger around this. If you do get a carbon fiber splinter, it's no more or less dangerous than, say, a wood splinter, so you just pull it out with tweezers and be on your way. Another way to sand your carbon, that's maybe the safest way, is wet sand it in the kitchen sink. This will wash it all down. No risk of it going airborne. And it's all clean when you're done. Now, because these were cut on a chop saw, there's always a little bit of splintering and chipping going on with these. It won't affect the strength at all, and it's going to be inside your wheel so you won't see it. But if you see a little bit of this chipping and splintering, don't worry too much about it. You can sand it off if you like, but it's not going to hurt anything. The next step in gluing is to make sure this is nice and clean. What I would do is use some alcohol or acetone to clean the carbon part, but don't use acetone on your plastic parts. You could melt your parts with acetone. Acetone, a good way to find it is a nail polish remover. But this is usually pure acetone. You get a little bottle of this and it does great for cleaning. So to prep the surface for gluing, a little bit of acetone, clean off this inner surface, let it dry it with the dry part. It will evaporate clear, so you're good to go. For the plastic parts, you want to clean these as well. I usually use alcohol, or if you can't find alcohol, Windex is essentially the same stuff. So just squirt some alcohol on a Q-tip, clean off this surface. There usually isn't any residue from the printing process, but I just like to make sure it's nice and clean. Check out this wheel face I did. Anybody recognize this? If you can tell what this is, leave it in the comments. Now, before I glue these in, I'm going to install the beadlock nuts. And I've actually given you multiple options for retaining your beadlock. So your beadlock nuts, your beadlock screws go in from this end, but on the back side, you've got 4 options for retaining the nuts to make them more durable. You can thread them directly into plastic if you want. Nothing wrong with that. They're just not super durable, and if you ever tighten them, it will strip the plastic. So what I've done is I have included these little hex shapes that you can press in a nut. Now, there are 2 standard size nuts for M1.6. Why? I don't know. One's a little bit smaller and one's a little bit bigger. I will include these smaller nuts and you just press them in. If you're really ambitious, you can also do some heat set brass inserts. You get a soldering iron, heat it up, press it right in. That's another way to do it. But remember, you are doing 48 screws per wheel set, so this is a little bit time consuming. I've done it and it's not my favorite. That's why I went to this design here. So a great way to do this is take your nuts that are included, take your screws, screw it down a little ways, and I find it's easier to hold it with some pliers, and then just find your spot and press it in place. There you go. This will take a little bit of effort. That's why it's a builder's kit. So for the hex adapters, there's 3 options. If you're using the weight hanger, you're going to have to use this aluminum one, which bolts in right here, and we will put that one on in just a minute. Alternatively, I'm sending you 2 plastic printable files, and there's actually 2 widths. If you want to run a 5mm narrower track width in the rear, you could run these narrow ones, or these standard ones are the same width as the aluminum ones. So when you're printing holes this small, they don't always turn out that great. This was printed on a bamboo printer, and you can see there's just some tiny divots here. So you're probably going to want to open up these holes with a 1.2mm drill bit. One way to do it is just press it into the cover and drill these holes down. Then you can tap right into the plastic. These are 2 samples of vapor smooth ones I got. These holes turned out great, but these holes kind of got melted over in the process. So in either case, I would clean these holes out with a drill bit, and then you can tap right into them. Or if you want, I do have aluminum ones available that have nice aluminum threads that'll be super durable. Now let's go on to the gluing. We've already cleaned these parts really nicely, and so the gluing will be very easy. I'm using this DAP Rapid Fuse glue. It's a variation of super glue that works better with plastics, especially nylons. You can also use this Loctite plastics. That's a 2-part. It's not a 2-part epoxy. I think it's got an activator and then a glue, and you use the 2 separately, I think. This is specifically for hard-to-bond plastics, and nylon is considered a hard-to-bond plastic. I've had great luck with this DAP Rapid Fuse. You can also use their primer for better results, but there are a couple options for making this work. Now, one trick, you might want to replace this face in the future if you want to try a different design or if it gets damaged. So one thing you can possibly do is just put 3 drops on. And this will allow you to break it free in the future if you ever want to replace this. All right, so now this is only glued in 3 spots. I could break this out with pliers, sand out the residue, and reuse this another time. Ideally, however, though, I like to use glue all the way around. So this inner one's never coming out. I'm going to put a little more glue around. This is a very low stress application. Be careful not to get it on your fingers. So that's glued in, the nuts are in place. If you're super anal, you can line up your bolts on this side with that side, although no one's ever going to know. I'm just going to wipe off the extra glue. And this will be dry in not very long. If this is your rear wheel, you are done, and it's time to install the tire. If you are doing a front wheel, and you're doing the weight hangers, you will start with this removed. And what you're going to do is build the weight hanger first. Now, I've made 2 improvements to this. Number 1, I've gone to a single bearing. My original design had 2 bearings, and bearings are generally designed to be used in pairs so that they balance each other and hold the axle stable. But something this small and this slight with such a big relative bearing is probably going to be fine with just 1 bearing. So my suggestion is just use 1 bearing. Press it in just like this. If for some reason your bearing is loose in your print, you can use some glue. I would not use a Loctite on plastics, but I would just use a drop of super glue, maybe 2 or 3 places. That'll help hold your bearing in. If you're going to glue it in, be sure to use alcohol or acetone to clean the oil off your bearing. Then a couple drops of glue, press it in. That shouldn't go anywhere. I have adjusted the print size so it's nice and tight with this printing technology. I can't guarantee what the fit will be on other print technologies. The next thing you want to do is install your tungsten cubes, which are included. So basically your tungsten cubes are going to go in like this. 2 from each side, 3 from the bottom, and you can actually double stack these here. So I recommend starting with 5 cubes because 7 adds up the weight really fast. But basically just press it in. If it's loose, you can use a little bit of glue to hold it in. Some are looser than others. I'm going to put a double stack in this side. There we go, and I'm going to double stack this one as well. And I left a little slot in case you need to push them out later. So if you see right here, there we go. So that's 5, because there's 2 up here. Pressing the sides. There we go. That is a nice heavy weight hanger, single bearing. And the next step is to install this into the hub. Now there's a little bump on this side. That side faces out. This bump is what's going to align with the alignment plate. The alignment plate you assemble like this. I didn't feel the need to do anything fancier than just a screw. This keeps the cost down, and this screw acts as a pin. Amateur, using pliers. Well, these are flush pliers, so this is actually a wrench, not pliers. Tighten that down. This is going to go on your steering knuckle eventually, and your weight hanger is going to align over that pin. And this pin is going to keep your weight hanger from rotating. Now this is optional. If you want your weight hanger to rotate to the lowest point on the vehicle, you're certainly welcome to use it without this. But ideally, when you're climbing a hill, you want this weight to be forward. So when your vehicle's level, it's down. When you're climbing a hill, you want this forward. That will give you the best results. So that's why this plate, when your vehicle's climbing, will shift the weight forward, and that is the best way to keep your front end down. So I recommend using this plate. It is designed specifically for Mayuse knuckles. If you have another axle or other knuckles, you may have to modify this. Just sand it out. If you want to get real fancy, you could drill some bolt holes into your knuckle and attach it on like that. I'm going to recommend and show you how to just use double-sided tape. Really simple and effective. So we've got the hanger built. We know that this side goes out, the side with the bump. And then we're going to install it into the wheel. And this hub goes through here. But before we do that, I've provided an O-ring here. This is just a little spacer, a little bumper. Takes up any slop that may come from manufacturing tolerances. So you put your O-ring on this, slide this through, and now I'm going to drop this in. It slides right in, just perfect fit. And now we're going to screw this down here. Put all 6 in. Again, don't over tighten. You could crush it right through this plastic face. If you guys work on SX24s a lot, you know that you don't need to over tighten things. Just a little bit of torque will do. All right, and if you've built it correctly, that weight will swing nice and free on the inside without rubbing on anything. And now you have a front wheel ready to mount the tire. So now to mount the tires. First, start by taking out the stock foams. You're not going to use these. You could potentially use these if you modify them, and I'll show you some tricks. What I like to use is this foam from Crawler Innovations. And this is the outer tuning ring of their dual stage foams. And I have a bunch of these left over from other projects, so this is just the right thickness. I'm going to use green in the front because it's softer. Usually when you're climbing up a hill, you want the softer foam in the front because there's less weight on the front wheels. All right, so that's going to be my foam. I'll cut 2 the exact same size. All right, set these aside. Now, what you've got to do is cut your tire because the beadlock is going to be up here and the tire is quite a bit smaller. These are 1.3s with a big 72 millimeter outside diameter. And so you've got to cut your tires. The best way to do it that I've found is to use these leather punches you can get on Amazon. There's links in the description. And the size that I use is this size right here. It's just a little bit smaller than this inner ring. This looks like 35 millimeters or 1 3/8, something like that. And so what I'm going to do is punch this tire, but it takes a little bit of a setup to do it right. You don't want to punch both sides at once because for sure you'll get one crooked. So what I did is I made this little puck and I drilled it out of an old piece of wood with a 50 millimeter hole saw that I happen to have laying around. You can use, any size hole saw that's smaller than your tire. It doesn't really matter. What you're going to do is put this puck inside the tire like this, and then you want it to stand up. So I'm going to just put a socket underneath it and then line this up and hit it with a punch. And that's going to give me a perfect ring cut out. This is just a support so I don't pinch the wheel on the back side. Set that down. There's probably quite a few ways to do this. This is just kind of what I figured out. You want to make sure this is nice and centered on the wheel all the way around. Probably helps to look inside, make sure it's centered just right. Then you'll want a block of wood that's a little bit bigger. If your ring's nice and symmetric, you know you did a good job. Then flip it over. It really helps to have a flashlight, look inside, make sure it's nice and even all the way around. Couple hits with a hammer. Pretty even ring. There you go. Now after a few hits, you'll have a bunch of rings put in here. You'll probably have to make a new one of these if you're doing more than 6 or 8 wheels. Okay, so ready to mount my tire. Put the foam in first. All right, so you got your foam in there. Put the wheel in here like this. I'm sure you put wheels on a million times. Okay, double check your foam is balanced on both sides. Now, the next step is to install the beadlocks, and then you're done. What I would suggest doing first is maybe marking where a nut is installed, because I put a whole bunch of holes in here for you. You want to make sure you get in the right hole. So I'm just going to mark where I am. That's going to be the first hole to use. And that hole is right there. Okay, so what you got to do is get the beadlock in place. The tire needs to sit on the outside of this flange. But I marked my hole right here, and what I'm going to do is poke a hole in the tire right on that hole. Now you want to be a little careful you don't push all the way through and push your nut out the back side, but kind of feel where that is and then just push through, punch a little hole. Alright, then it's easiest once you get one screw started. I use Torx fasteners. They're star-shaped. They're all right, so once you get that going through the rubber, you're going to grab your nut on the back side, and it's going to cinch down nice and tight, grabbing that nut on the back side. Not sure if you can see in there, but yeah, got the nut. Make sure the screws are short enough that they don't rub on your weight hanger. I'm using 6s, you might use 5s. But then we're going to loosen this just a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to go through and do all the others. So I'm just going to punch another hole here. Again, I'm being careful not to punch it through super hard so it pushes the nut out the back. It's not the end of the world. I just have to put the nut back in on the back side. Might as well punch a couple more while I'm here. All you got to do is just get a little pilot hole started. Then your screw will kind of find its way through the rubber if you just got a little hole started. And there you go. And you want to draw them all up evenly. So get a couple started. Get them all started. There you go. Now be careful not to over tighten them. There isn't a hard stop at the bottom of these bolts. The tighter you make it, the tighter it pinches the rubber sidewall. So you do want to be careful not to over tighten. Go around, crisscross applesauce, tighten them gently, and no need to over tighten them. Then you do the same thing on the back, and you're good to go. So here's the beadlock, made from carbon fiber, and the beadlock bolts, which I do not include because I want you to have the option to specify what type of bolt head you want for your beadlocks. Silver, black, button head, round head, flush head, whatever. So you're going to find your own beadlock bolts. And you need 6 per side, which is 12 per wheel, which is 48 for a complete wheel set. And this is what the more traditional protruding beadlock bolt will look like. Personally, I prefer a flush look, and I know everybody doesn't like that look, so I did not do this on all of them, but if you want, I'm happy to countersink all of these for you for a small upcharge, and what you'll have is a flush mounted bolt that doesn't stick out. This just slides over rocks a little bit better, but maybe not everybody likes the look. And also the wrench flats get really small, which is why I like to use these Torx fasteners, which are star shaped. So this is what I like, but I want you to have the option to build it the way you like. Now another thing about these beadlocks is that on one side there is a gentle chamfer. So you want to be sure the chamfered side, the smoother side, goes against the tire. And that's just to avoid having the sharp carbon edge dig into your tire. So when you get these, you want to look really closely and pick the side that's a little bit smoother to put against the tire. You might want to sand a little bit more off this inner edge, just so you have a nice soft edge against your tire and you don't risk digging into your tire or tearing it. So sharp edge to the outside, smooth edge to the inside. Now for the very last step, adding your clocking plate. Now this is actually optional. If you want your weight to always be hanging at the bottom, you can just run the wheels like this. Although you will get better performance if you have the weight hanger clocked in a forward position, and so it always stays in that forward position. I've done a couple videos on why that's beneficial, but you know, run it the way you like. Now these are designed specifically for Mayuse axles, just because it fits around this ring. If you have a different knuckle, you may need to sand this or file it or modify it in some way. I can't really guarantee the fit on all the different knuckles that are out there, but it does fit perfectly on Mayuse. And so let's say your axle, this is your front axle, and this is the front of your vehicle, and let's say you're climbing up a hill, and let's say you think you can climb 60 degrees. Well, you want to have this clocked forward 60 degrees from vertical. That will keep your weight hanger pushed towards the front, and when your vehicle's climbing at 60 degrees, it'll keep it pushed to the front as much as possible. And having your weight hanger out in the front will keep your front end down. So rather than have your weight hanger hanging straight down when you're on a steep incline, you want your hanger clocked forward to weight and hold that front end down. So that's why this plate is important, because it keeps your weight forward when you're on a steep climb instead of just hanging straight down. And I've kept this plate as simple as possible in the interest of cost and complexity. All you do is put this screw and nut in here, and then we're going to use some double-sided tape to stick it onto here. If you want to get crazy, you can probably drill some holes or fabricate this differently so it's more secure, although there's really not very much force on this at all. All it does is restrain the rotational force of the weight hanger, so you're really only pushing against the friction in the bearing. This doesn't really have super high strength requirements. So here's what I would recommend. Take some double-sided tape. There's links to all the supplies in the description. And what I would do is just put maybe 3 pieces of tape. And I probably should have started by saying, for best results, you want to clean this with alcohol. You can even sand this surface a little bit to roughen it up. And on the back of your carbon, you also want to sandpaper this and clean it with alcohol or acetone so that your tape sticks. But what I'm going to do is just take 3 little pieces of tape, like this. If you want, you could punch out a full circle. Now I'm just going to press that tape down for a second. Okay, I just wanted that to be down tight. Then pick this off. It's always really hard to get this off for some reason. If anybody has a trick how to remove the red plastic, let us know, because for some reason this red tape is always so hard to get off. All right, one more. You could do 2, 3, 4 pieces, as many as you want. All right, then probably make sure these edges are trimmed nice and close so they don't collect dirt. And then what we'll do is we'll hold the wheel vertically. I'm going to place this rotated about 20 degrees to the front. Place it on. You can measure it if you like to be more precise. But the trick to all VHB tape is you need to apply pressure for 30 seconds. So that's what I'm going to do, is just hold this for 30 seconds. All right, after 30 seconds, that'll be on there really nice and strong. And then when you're putting your wheel together, all you do is line up this 1 bolt. You might remember the original version had 2 bolts. I realized you really only need 1. So that's why I've redesigned it this way with 1 bolt. Super easy to slide together. And there you go. You may need an extended axle nut in here. Depends on which hex adapters you're using. But there you go. That is how you build the wheels. Thanks for purchasing. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Happy to help you, and I hope you enjoy them.